So I kind of viewed our health journey as a balancing act, if you like. On the one side, if stress is affecting us in that way, compromising our immune system and promoting chronic inflammation, and it's a problem, then it always helps, if you're going to solve a problem, to know what that problem is. So looking at stress from that 5-stressor model is a good way of identifying and minimizing the stresses that affect your health and life, mentally, physically, emotionally. The other side of the balancing beam, then, is to build resilience. So in our modern world, given everything we're exposed to, it's arguably never been more important to build resilience into your life. And if you're going to do that, it helps to have a structure. And so again, I've come up with 5 pillars. It's not my come up with. I mean, this is common, I think. Those 5 pillars are sleep, breathe, nourish, move, and think.
From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
Hey everybody, I'm Hilda Labrada Gore, and this is episode 222. Our guest today is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Dr. Ron is one of Australia's leading holistic health advocates. He is a podcaster, the president of Australasian College of Nutritional Environmental Medicine, and he has over 35 years of clinical practice. During that time, he has developed a comprehensive model of how stress impacts our lives and how to reduce it. He is the author of A Life Less Stressed. And today we cover the 5 pillars of his model that help us build health in the face of life's stressors. The discussion covers so much, including why we need a good amount of sleep, the importance of nasal breathing, how to make absolutely certain you are eating a nutrient-dense diet, and much, much more. This conversation is perfect as we launch the new year and look to take control of our health, build resilience, and be the best we can be. Before we get into it, a quick word. Get our new 2020 shopping guide. It is so sweet, you guys. It has over 100 pages of our most recommended sources for beverages, bread, butter, ghee, cheese, cod liver oil, condiments, ferments. You get the idea. I could go on and on. Meat, milk, nuts, seeds, jerky, yogurt, etc. So get it today for only $3 on our website, or just go ahead and become a member, support our work, and get it for free. Thanks so much in advance. And this episode is also brought to you in part by grass-fed liver and bone marrow by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements makes New Zealand-sourced, nose-to-tail, organ meats, liver, and bone marrow in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. Beef liver and bone marrow are the most effective foods to support health and wellness. These traditional foods were, and still are, fundamental to our biology. So visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world has left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Ron.
Thank you so much, Hilda. I've been so looking forward to catching up with you again.
I love your perspective on holistic dentistry, regenerative agriculture, and you really get the whole big picture about wellness, don't you?
Well, I like to think so. I mean, it's a learning experience for me. I've only been in practice now for 40 years, so I'm starting to get a grip on what's going on. And, I feel like along the way I've picked up a lot of interesting perspectives and a structure for asking all the right questions anyway.
Well, tell me about how you first got into this whole field of holistic dentistry and wellness. I know that you had finished dental school and were practicing in London when you had an aha moment when a patient came in that needed some adjustment on her crown. Is that right?
That's it. That's what got me started on this journey. It was quite unexpected.
Tell us the details.
I was just 6 months out of dental school working in London, and a patient came in. Every patient was a new patient then for me. And they had a part of their history was they had a crown done 5 years earlier that was uncomfortable. And I looked at it and I thought, well, we could just adjust it. It seemed probably a little bit high. And I did that. And she came back a week later and she said, yeah, how's the crown? And she went, yeah, it's fine. But the interesting thing is these headaches that I'd been getting every day for 5 years have gone. And that kind of surprised me. And in the few months after that, I looked at a few other patients and a similar thing happened. And so I came to realize rather unexpectedly that dentistry was a whole lot more than just a tooth, but there was a whole person attached to the tooth. And if the tooth on the crown or anything I did was out of balance, that it would affect, well, in this case, muscles around the head, neck, and jaw, causing chronic tension headaches and neck aches. But there was, as I've learned over the years, there's a hell of a lot more going on there than just that. So it was a real aha moment that there was much more happening in the person's mouth than just their teeth and their gums.
And they didn't teach you that in medical school and dental school?
You know, dentistry is so challenging technically that they didn't. The short answer to that is no, they didn't. And it's such a shame that they didn't. But as I was saying, it's a really technically challenging course. And when you are setting people out in the community and they're going to be picking up drills that they put in people's mouths, you want to be sure that technically they know what they're doing with the tooth. And they are technically challenging enough. So by the time you get out of dental school, you know, you've had enough experience to do a filling or a crown or something, some minor surgical work. But, you know, looking at the whole person, it's a pity that it wasn't an introductory part and then say, once you graduate, this is the beginning of your journey, not the end. I often joke and say, I only wish I knew as much as I thought I did the day I graduated. The day I graduated, I thought, wow, I've done 5 years of dental school. I've been taught by the best professors in Australia. I just know it all. And I really very quickly realized, oh my God, no, I don't. And this is just the beginning of a journey and not the end. And so it's been a learning experience ever since. But, you know, the main point about it was that, and people often do ask, what is holistic dentistry? And it's quite simply a dentist with an attitude. And that attitude is that there's a whole person attached to this mouth, and there is an awful lot going on in the person's mouth that they need to be aware of.
As a matter of fact, there's a whole lot going on in the whole body, right? That impacts the oral health. Isn't that so?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the mouth's the beginning of the digestive tract. So, you know, if you think breaking down food and preparing it for a digestion is important, a well-functioning masticatory system is important. It's the gateway to the respiratory tract. So if you've got a narrow jaw and crowded teeth, and this was something that I know Weston A. Price really explored to his surprise, I think, then, you know, not only is a narrow jaw and crowded teeth, but it is also shapes the upper airway. So the nasal passages and sinuses and the way you breathe can be affected. And then it's the home of the two most chronic infections known to man, woman, or child, tooth decay and gum disease. If the hardest thing in your body decays because of what you eat, just imagine what's going on to the rest of your body. And you don't have to, you just have to look at the statistics, you know, in both our societies, in America and Australia. And then there's the whole toxicity issue, and then there's the chronic pain issue. So people's diet affects their oral health, and their oral health affects their whole health. And it's all connected.
It is all connected.
It's all connected.
I want to return to something you said a moment ago. You said the hardest part of our body decays because of what we eat. I think in Western society and in a lot of the world now, we think the hardest part of our body, the teeth, decay because we don't have proper oral hygiene.
Yes, well, that's an interesting one. And you know, in Weston A. Price's time, in the 100 years ago, tooth decay was absolutely rampant. I mean, you know, it affected almost every tooth in everybody's mouth. And tooth decay has certainly reduced in the last 40 or 50 years. Interestingly, it's reduced in both fluoridated and non-fluoridated countries. The key being that people are now brushing their teeth more. But tooth decay still remains the most common non-communicable infectious disease in man, woman, or child. So according to the statistics, 90% of the adult population, that's anybody over 20, have had some experience of tooth decay. Now, that's still quite an extraordinary statistic. And even with oral hygiene, that is still happening. So diet plays a very big part in this whole process. And again, looking at some of the preventable chronic, non-infectious diseases, degenerative diseases that are now common in our society, heart disease, cancer, 80 autoimmune diseases, diabetes, mental health, all connected to our food. And there, overlaid on that, is the fact that 90% of the population have some experience of tooth decay. So, yeah, there's a lot of connections.
Yeah, I'm just letting that sink in for a moment. With all of our modern techniques, the electric toothbrushes and the floss, like you said, the fluoridation of water, which I understand isn't actually to our benefit, but be that as it may, like with all these supposed advances, and yet we're besieged by chronic illnesses.
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, let's not dismiss it. Oral hygiene is a really important thing. Those brushing and flossing and all of that is absolutely important, because it's one of the reasons. It is, in fact, I believe, the reason why tooth decay has come down globally in the last 40 or 50 years. Across the globe, it's come down. So, but it still remains such a huge problem. So, definitely, it's something that people need to give serious thought to.
And the fact that you tie our oral health to the nutrient-dense foods that we eat or the nutrient-poor foods that we eat, is that related to your study of the work of Dr. Price? And tell us when you came across his work.
Part of my journey very early on, like literally within a year or two of graduating, was exploring this. And I went around and did a lot of courses, and I stumbled upon one in the early 80s, very early, about 1982 or 3, where a model of stress was presented to me, which said our health is affected by stress, which was quite a breakthrough at that point, because stress wasn't the word it is today, ubiquitous. And he said our stress is a combination of emotional, environmental, postural, nutritional, and dental stress. And that's the model of healthcare that I've been using in my practice for over 35 years.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, 5 stresses: emotional, environmental, postural, nutritional, and dental stress. Now, being in my mid-20s at the time, I really wasn't very comfortable with dealing with the emotional stress part. And the environmental stress was a really new thing. I mean, environment wasn't really talked about a whole lot more. I mean, Rachel Carson had talked about it, but it wasn't as accepted as it is today. So I explored nutrition very early on, and I did my first nutrition course in about 1981. And that led me to explore. I stumbled upon a very old copy of Weston A. Price's book, and I was blown away. I mean, this guy had set out looking for tooth decay and uncovered a hell of a lot more than he expected, and the implications for. I still refer to it as probably the most important bit of research ever done, and probably even more important today than it was then.
I couldn't agree with you more. And so how did you apply it to your life? And then how did it change your dental practice?
I applied it to my life with a very simple, there were kind of 4 things that I consider, because I actually wrote a chapter in a nutrition book in 1996 as a result of all this. And it was called the dental therapies, complementary therapies in dentistry. And the overlying principles were that all food should be whole, there should be variety, there should be free of sugar and white flour and preservatives. And so they were kind of guiding principles. But then the whole journey around what actually nutrient-dense food means has been an experience that still goes on to this very day. And that's our biggest challenge, that the food that we consume is actually nutrient-dense, and understand what that means and why we all need to be very aware of the whole food and agriculture industry. It's something that affects us all.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. You and I were speaking earlier about how your podcast this past year, you interviewed so many people on the theme of regenerative agriculture. So you really are digging deep into the roots of where our nutrient-dense food comes from and why that matters.
That's right. Well, I've just did a year in review, which is coming out next week. And I just thought, wow, okay, here it is. I just sort of laid out what all my guests were particularly talking about. And regenerative agriculture was a theme we came back to so often from different perspectives, because food and agriculture should be on everybody's mind. I mean, it literally affects everything that is important to us. It affects our health, it affects our environment. It's a cultural thing. We can see what's happening in terms of immigration as systems break down, how much disruption occurs in immigration in various parts. It affects food security, food safety. It's a whole world and a whole body experience, and the two are intimately connected.
Absolutely. And our whole world is connected to the land and that we we eat every day. This is something we do, or at least we try to eat every day, to nourish ourselves. So the whole world should be concerned about this. And of course, it informs our health on a lot of levels. You mentioned that you contributed to a book on dental complementary therapies. So I know you've also written the book, A Life Less Stressed. Can you talk to us a little bit about what motivated you to write that and what the pillars are?
Over these last 40 years, I have explored those 5 stresses. And again, they are emotional, environmental, postural, nutritional, and dental. Well, a life less stressed is something that I still to this very day aspire to. It's certainly not autobiographical. And everybody that I'd say, oh, I've written a book called The Life Less Stressed, they go, oh my God, I must read that. And I hope they do, because almost everybody acknowledges that stress is impacting on their health in some way. And so I defined stress clinically in my practice as anything that had the potential to compromise your immune system or to promote chronic inflammation. So I kind of viewed our health journey as a balancing act, if you like. On the one side, if stress is affecting us in that way, compromising our immune system and promoting chronic inflammation, and it's a problem, then it always helps, if you're going to solve a problem, to know what that problem is. So looking at stress from that 5-stressor model is a good way of identifying and minimizing the stresses that affect your health and life, mentally, physically, emotionally. The other side of the balancing beam, then, is to build resilience. So in our modern world, given everything we're exposed to, it's arguably never been more important to build resilience into your life. And if you're going to do that, it helps to have a structure. And so again, I've come up with 5 pillars. It's not my come up with. I mean, this is common, I think. And that is, those 5 pillars are sleep, breathe, nourish, move, and think. So our world is becoming more complex and confronting and challenging and stressful. I believe that the solutions are actually remarkably simple. And personally, on a personal level, focusing on those 5 pillars is important. Well, okay, look, they're all interconnected. So thinking of them in a linear way is not necessarily very holistic. But let's talk about them one by one. I would rate as sleep is a really important one. I mean, I believe, and this is confirmed by lots of research, that your sleep is your built-in, non-negotiable life support system. I've heard that said, and I love that phrase, and I believe it's true. It's your built-in, non-negotiable life support system. And a consistently good night's sleep will give you the mental, physical, and emotional energy to deal with the challenges of life. And every single measure of health is affected. So a consistently good night's sleep is a function of quantity. And for 90% of the population, that is getting between 7 and 9 hours sleep a night. Now, interestingly, the people that only get 3 to 4 hours sleep a night know they're not getting enough sleep. Every health measure is affected by that. It's the group that sleeps 6 hours a night that are the most interesting, because they think they're getting enough sleep, but actually they perform just as badly as the 3 to 4 hour people. Our hormones affected, our memory is affected, our emotional health is affected, our cardiovascular, all cause of death is affected. It just goes on and on and on. So it's a question of quantity and quality, which means putting your head on the pillow isn't enough. You've got to be breathing well while you're asleep.
You are hitting the nail on the head. I heard a story of a DJ in the 1950s who decided he was going to pull like a 3-day no sleep marathon. And it was one of those little, build some buzz for our radio station kind of thing. And people came in to watch him. And he started out the little experiment by like waving at the audience. He was in a great mood, blah, blah, blah. And then as time wore on, being sleep deprived, of course, his mood went sour. He became anxious and irritable. And apparently he never recovered. He ended up losing his job. Like his whole life shifted because of the intense sleep deprivation he had. Now, of course, our situation is different, but still it goes to show how much our body depends on that sleep to restore itself and to be properly functioning.
Look, hormones are affected. Growth hormone goes down. We need growth hormone for repair. Insulin resistance goes up. I mean, that's the common denominator in so many diseases. Leptin, which helps us metabolize fat, goes down, so we become more obese. Ghrelin, a hormone in our stomach that tells us we're hungry, goes up, so we start to make irrational decisions about, it's not just weakness, it's hormones going out of balance. That part of our DNA that stimulates our immune system, that promotes our immune system, is downregulated, so our immune system goes down. That part of our DNA that promotes chronic inflammation goes up. Our part of our brain that's involved in memory, the hippocampus, that shuts down. That part of our brain that affects emotions, called the amygdala, goes crazy. So when you're not getting enough sleep, of course you're more emotional, because that part of your brain called the amygdala is firing on all cylinders. It is just it's the big one, and that is a really, I think, the key to a good night's sleep, a consistently good night's sleep, that's important. It's not just 1 or 2 nights. This is a lifelong goal. The key to a consistently good night's sleep is to prioritize it, to make it important. And that leads you into a whole discussion about sleep hygiene and what that actually means.
Oh, yeah. I know there are a lot of tips that we can give, and I'm sure we can direct people to your website for resources on that. I've made it a priority, and I'm so thankful for the ways in which it's really restorative sleep that I'm getting that allows me to function properly. But let's go on to your next pillar. I know breathing is important even as we sleep, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the secret to living a long life is to keep breathing for as long as you can. That's not a big breakthrough, I know, but the secret to living a life in good health is to breathe well for as long as you can. And there's a very big difference between just breathing and breathing well, because breathing is all about, well, on a localized level, it's all about warming, humidifying, and filtering the air before we take it into our lungs. Breathing and breathing well involves breathing through your nose, slowly and gently, breathing from the diaphragm. So if you've got a set of lungs, you may as well use the whole lot. So breathing from the diaphragm as well. So nasal breathing and from the diaphragm has whole body effects that are quite profound. It affects body chemistry, the acid-alkali balance. It affects nitric oxide production, which is a really important regulator. The use of the diaphragm on 8 to 12 breaths per minute, slowly but very gently, also massages internal organs and also promotes pelvic floor muscle tone. So the whole body effect, the way you breathe also affects your head posture. If you're a mouth breather, you're far more likely to have a head forward posture, which in our world is a big enough problem anyway, as people look at their computers or look down at their phones. But if you're a mouth breather, that's a real problem too. So breathing well is another really important pillar.
I'm really happy that you're bringing this up. This has been at the forefront of my mind. I feel like it's getting more attention in the US, how we breathe. So I've been making an effort to breathe more through my nose, be intentional, just pay attention to how I'm breathing. But how can we possibly do that while we're sleeping, Ron?
Well, that's an interesting one. We actually promote, and now a company in America, I think it's in America, has got a wonderful product, but here it is, the use of micropore tape, a little bit of hypoallergenic, low allergy, very thin paper tape on the mouth at night can be a really interesting thing to try. And before people rush off to do this at night, they can do a 2-minute test in their own home diagnostically. So what they do is they take this thin hypoallergenic tape and put it on their mouth to keep their lips closed. And one of 3 things will happen. And then just breathe gently and slowly through your nose. One of 3 things will happen. Either, first alternative, you're breathing well through your nose. That's great. You can do this at night. The second alternative is a person thinks, oh, my nose is blocked. I won't be able to do this. But paradoxically, when they put this tape on and they breathe gently, as their body chemistry corrects itself, their nose miraculously unblocks, in which case they can try it at night. But the third alternative is they put the tape on and after 2 minutes, they cannot breathe through their nose. Take the tape off and go and see either an integrative doctor who can assess why your nose is blocked and whether you should be avoiding certain foods because or there may be something within your house, mold, dust mite, that is causing your nasal passages to be so inflamed. or maybe they need to go and see an ENT specialist to see whether there's a physical obstruction. So that's a diagnostic test that can take you 2 minutes to do. Once you've established that either your nose is fine or you thought your nose was blocked but it unblocked, then you can use it at night. And it's good to practice this while you're watching TV or reading a book, not just before you go to bed. But use of micropore tape on the mouth has had some very interesting research done. There was an article in the Journal of Otolaryngology, I can't even say that properly, head and neck surgery in 2015, which did some really fascinating study showing that it was an effective way of even treating mild obstructive sleep apnea. And we have been using that in our practice I've been using it personally for the last 10, 15 years. I thought it would overcome my snoring. It actually didn't do that, but it actually did promote a better night's sleep. And I still use it to this very day. And so many patients I've recommended that to, and we actually gift them this $2 roll of tape. And as I said, a company who is involved in the sleep space have actually come up with a product called Somnifix.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Yeah. Well, we've got it in our practice, and I give a sample out to everybody with their roll. That works well. But my point is, practicing that at night can have a profound impact on your sleep and a profound impact on your energy levels. It is not the be-all and end-all. There are little nuances attached to it, but that's an example of how you can use something very simple.
That's exciting. Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes to those Somnifix tape. And I know that's not the only brand. People can look around, but it's an intriguing concept. I think it's great for the sleep. It might not be so good for the love life, right?
Well, I do often say to people, and I demonstrate this in my surgery when I show them how to use it, I do warn them. I say, listen, don't walk into your bedroom with tape on your mouth because it'll send the wrong message to your partner. And it's not the most romantic thing to do, but there can be a nice little ritual that you develop where you very caringly and carefully put a little bit of tape on the bedside table of your partner and just say, have a really good night's sleep. You can build good ritual into
it. Coming up, Ron breaks down exactly what we need to eat for a nutrient-dense diet, and he hits on the last 3 pillars for the less stressed life.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Hey guys, travel with me for an ancestral tour of Ecuador. It is going to be mind-blowing. We are going April 1st to the 8th to explore, engage, and experience Ecuador. Together, we will take in ancient, historic sites in Quito and its environs. We will visit Mindo, for example, which is well known for its butterflies. We'll eat traditional foods, of course, and connect with the people there who are familiar with Wise Traditions. We'll also get to do some of my favorite biohacks like jumping into waterfalls and catching the morning sunrise. I can't wait for this trip, and I hope you join me. Space is limited, so sign up today. Go to my website, holistichilda.com, for details. And act fast so you can take advantage of the early bird pricing. I'll see you in Ecuador. Hasta pronto. This episode is also brought to you in part by grass-fed liver and bone marrow by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements makes New Zealand-sourced, nose-to-tail organ meats, liver, and bone marrow in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. Beef liver and bone marrow are the most effective foods to support health and wellness. These traditional foods were, and still are, fundamental to our biology. It's incredibly insightful to see how animals in the wild instinctively go for the liver and the bone marrow first, leaving the muscle meats for the birds. Even then, birds will be caught taking marrow bones high into the sky and dropping them onto the rocks in order to gain access to the inside. Liver and bone marrow provide concentrated amounts of vitamin A, choline, folate, B12, copper, heme iron, and fat-soluble activators that are now absent in the modern diet. This nourishment is known to support methylation and fundamental health. So visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world has left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions.
Another pillar is nourish. And, nourish is obviously a big one. But getting a good night's sleep and breathing well while you're asleep helps you make better decisions about what you're going to eat. And I think this is very much, as we said, about a nutrient-dense diet. And, there are 118 elements in the periodic table. This is going back to high school chemistry, Hilda. And the human body needs 60 of them, and we know what 25 to 30 of those are. So a nutrient-dense diet means that you are getting a good spread of those elements, those 60 elements that we need. And so, we hear a lot about plant-based diets, and I think vegetables grown in a healthy soil are really important. Vegetables are not without their problems. You could have oxalates, you could have phytates, you could have FODMAPs, you could have a whole range of things in vegetables. But let's say vegetables are an important part of a diet. I think healthy fats are critical, and what we've been told over the last 30 or 40 years about what a healthy fat is so wrong that, it has set us up for all of these disease problems we've had. But healthy fats are traditional fats that we've had a relationship with for literally thousands of years. And those fats, often come from animals that have been ethically grown, raised, nurtured, honoured. And we have a relationship. We've had a relationship with animals throughout our entire human history. And I think we were talking before we came on about a hero of both of ours, Alan Savory. And Alan Savory said to me, I'm sure he said to you too, that it's not the resource that's the problem. It's the way it's managed. Things need to be managed in a holistic context. So, this is why my focus is so much on regenerative agriculture. Animals are not the problem, although the way they're managed is the problem. They are very much part of the solution. So healthy fats from healthy animals, of course, olive oil and nut oils are okay as well. Seed oils, as Western Price Foundation is fantastic at expressing, seed oils are a major problem to our health, even though they are endorsed by many health authorities. This is part of the whole, our health story is a great economic model. It's just not a very good health model. So healthy fats, a moderate amount of ethically grown protein. Also, what's good for an animal is generally good for us. And what's good for us and the animal is generally good for the planet. So that's a win-win-win as far as I'm concerned. Water is still the best drink, although getting it to our house is one thing. What we do with it once we turn the tap on is another. So in my home, I have a reverse osmosis water filter, and which strips every mineral, chemical, everything out of the water. So I take a few grains of Himalayan rock salt and I put that in the water, and bingo, I've got pure, clean mineral water that is available on my tap. Salt is another thing that's been demonized. I think we need salt and good salt. Table salt, processed salt, only has 2 minerals in it, sodium and chloride. A healthy salt like Himalayan rock salt or Celtic sea salt has up to 40, 50 or 60 elements in it. So, that's an important part of our diet. Have I left out anything? I think that about covers it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And your words are music to our ears, because at the Weston Price Foundation, we're all about nutrient density. We know how that helps us function so well on all these levels, and that eliminates a lot of stressors on the body. When we eat processed foods that contain preservatives or additional, additives and chemicals that our bodies don't know what to do with, that's a stressor. So by eating nutrient-dense foods, we're going to take those pseudo foods out of our diet and let our bodies function with the food that they can best absorb and make use of. So your next pillar kind of surprised me, Ron. It's postural. Is that right?
Well, it's move. Postural, this is the balancing beam here, Hilda. On one side of the 5 stresses, on the other side of the 5 pillars. And what sits in between are our genes and our epigenetics, the way our genes express themselves. But that's a whole other discussion. The other pillar is move. And that's rather liberating when you look into it, because it turns out less is more. What I mean by that is, if you did, say, 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes of high-intensity intermittent training, incorporating functional movements. Functional movements means bending and stretching, twisting and turning, pulling and pushing. They are functional movements. And if you incorporate them along with some weight-bearing exercise into a 15 or 20-minute workout, your metabolism will be raised for 24 to 48 hours. Now, if you go for a 10-kilometer run, it might be raised for 6 to 8 hours. Now, people go for long runs for lots of reasons. A lot of it's meditation, it's very relaxing, it's a whole range of reasons, but we don't have to do that. Less is more. So all we need to do is say 3 or maybe 4 times a week, those kind of 15-minute, 20-minute workouts, also incorporating walking into your life. Walking is a wonderful exercise because it's safe, it's social, it's sustainable. You get out into the world, and so that is another thing. Postural stress also involves our relationship with our technology. We've been for the last few million years. It's been quite a challenge balancing this 10-pound ball on our spine, which we call our head, and that's been a big challenge posturally for us. And if you tilt your head down 5, 10, 15, or 20 degrees as you look in any public space, and you'll see people looking down at their devices, suddenly you turn that 10-pound ball into a 40 or 50-pound ball, and that creates postural stresses. A sleep position is a postural stress. If you sleep on your stomach, that's the worst position to sleep in for your head, neck, and jaw, and airway and lower back. Sleeping on your back's a little bit of a problem, particularly as we get older, because our jaw drops back and our tongue's attached to our lower jaw, and that can block the airway and cause snoring or obstruction. So sleeping on your side turns out to be the best. Another postural stress, and I got into chronic pain, very early on in my career, and I did a lot of interesting research with a podiatrist. So foot mechanics are an important picture to consider, particularly when people are in chronic lower back pain or problems, and that's a problem in our society. So foot mechanics are a potential postural stress. And the last one is actually how we sit on the toilet, because for millions of years we've been squatting, and our large intestine, our colon, our rectum is very well designed, or has evolved to be in that squatting position. And for the last couple of 100 years, and God bless having a toilet, I'm not criticizing having a toilet, but the seating position on the toilet can be a postural stress. And just by having a little stool around the toilet that allows you to squat while sitting on the toilet can have a profound impact. So moving is really important, and it turns out less is more. You don't have to actually do a lot to make a difference.
Wow, that's really encouraging. And I think we think a lot of times we have more is more. We've got to, be sweating profusely and giving our all until we're exhausted. And what I hear you saying is movement is important, and a variety of movement is important, but it doesn't need to be as intense or as long to get the benefit that we need.
No, that's exactly right. And it's quite liberating, I think.
I think so too. So talk to us about the last pillar.
Well, the last pillar is think. And, when it's one thing to say we don't have much control over events and people perhaps in our lives, but we do have control about how we think about it. And that's easier said than done, because that's why it's important to build resilience. And that's why a good night's sleep is important, and breathing and nourish. Mood and food has a lot of connections. But I reference in my book the work of Martin Seligman, who is a professor of psychology in the East Coast, I think, of America. And he's been a champion of positive psychology. But more recently, he's focused on health and wellness and had what he called a PERMA model, PERMA. And the P stands for positive emotions, being positive. The E stands for engagement. This is a way of thinking about how you think impacting on your health and wellness. So are your thoughts positive? You have control over that. Are you engaged in what you do? That's really important. The R is for relationships. Now, there's a very interesting study that's come out of Harvard. Well, it didn't just come out. It's been going for 75 years. It's the longest study on health, wellness, and longevity that's ever been done. And they found the best predictor of health, wellness, and longevity was relationships. And look, if you are fortunate enough to have a significant other, that's fantastic. But it doesn't just rely on that. It's about relationships with family, with friends, with community, with sporting clubs or churches or whatever it is that you're connected to, but connecting with real people, not just friends on Facebook, not just texting X, Y, or Z, but face-to-face real people is really important. So that's the R. The M in the PERMA model is meaning. Is there meaning in what you do, in the relationships that you have, in the time that you spend doing whatever you do? And the A is, are you acknowledged? Is there some accomplishment in what you've done? And more recently, interestingly, there's been an added letter, and the letter added to the end is H. So PERMAH, and the H stands for health, because focusing on health makes it a lot easier to think, more positively. So, that's the kind of the think. And I guess the thing that I have learned most from that whole journey, if you like, is gratitude, the power of gratitude. We actually have so much when we reflect on it to be grateful for. And it's such a simple thing to do that is good for us and good for the people we express gratitude to, that it's a really powerful tool we should all be using a hell of a lot more.
I feel like it flips a switch in me from bitterness or anger or unhappiness to positivity. And just by that simple act of thinking what I'm grateful for as my head hits the pillow at the end of the day, or taking a little time to journal in the beginning of the day, sets the course for my mood for my day or for my sleep. So I found it to be a phenomenal tool.
Oh, yeah. And look, thoughts are things. They are real things. They're little chemicals called neurotransmitters. And they attach onto our cell membranes and they cause our genes to express themselves in a particular way. And so, we need to build resilience that allows us to have thoughts which are actually promoting good health.
That's really good.
Easier said than done. Easier said than done. I'll acknowledge that. But having a structure to reduce the stress and build resilience helps achieve that.
Well, and I think this conversation is pointing us in the right direction to thinking about our health and what the stressors are on our lives, and considering pivoting and adopting some of these techniques and tools that you've given us in the conversation. So thank you so much.
That's a pleasure, Hilda. Thank you.
And I have one final question for you. Now, I know there are 5 pillars, so I don't know if you're going to pick one of those, but if the listener could do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do, Ron?
Well, I think the most important thing, without a doubt, is to accept that your health is just too important to leave to anybody else, that you have to take control of it yourself. And I think that is a really important step. And if you're going to do that, then you need to have a structure by which to do it. And we've talked about some of that. But the most important step in that process is to accept, A, that you are responsible for your own health, and work out what the balance, because we live in a real world and I'm not 100% all the time. You've got to work out what your percentage is. And I think if it's a 50-50 split of doing good things and not so good things, that's not good enough. You've got to work out what your percentage is. And for me, 80-20 is what I consider achievable and doable. When I'm really on fire, I'm 90-10, doing 90% great things for my health. And hey, I live in the modern world, 10% of the time, give me a break. I'm not perfect. And if I ever get to 100%, I might be a social outcast, and I'm almost certain my family wouldn't want to even talk to me. So I think it is about prioritizing your own health and finding that comfort, that sweet spot where you're being in the modern world and being realistic about how you approach it.
Fantastic. Well, that is a great word to end on. We're going to do just that. We really appreciate your time, Ron. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Hilda.
Our guest today was Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Learn more from him and his work on his website, drronehrlich.com. You can find me on my Holistic Hilda YouTube channel. And for the show notes for this and every episode of the podcast, visit our website, westinaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And that's it. Thanks for listening, everybody. And here's to a happy, healthy new year.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.